I don't see them cowering in Beijing at the
Mm,
thought of tariffs from
tariffs.
Trump, to be honest. We already have tariffs. We've got 20% tariffs on a lot of goods. He's threatened tariffs before. And curiously, he thinks that if he puts tariffs on Chinese goods, it's the Chinese who pay the tariff. It's not, it's the American consumer. And he goes on insisting that this is a tax on foreign countries. No, it's not. So, they'll sell a fewer goods into the United States, but it's not going to change their policy on Taiwan.
Isabel has just been part of a panel on the question of, is China in decline? My first question for you, Isabel, is do you think China is in decline?
Well, as I said on the panel, it depends on your baseline and it slightly depends in relation to whom. So in terms of GDP growth, which is what people tend to look at, GDP growth is declining. It is still growing, but the rate of growth is declining. Now, that's not a surprise. It's been, China had that rapid catch-up phase of growing at kind of double digits and so on. That always ends. It ended in South Korea, it ended in Japan, it ended in Taiwan. The economy has to get smarter, more efficient, and all those things. So, but living through that phase for China, the challenge is, what does it do to the politics? So those were moments in all of the countries that I mentioned in which you had democratic movements, you had essentially dictatorships were ended. Now the Chinese know that. So how do they manage this moment when you can't just let people enjoy double-digit growth, when you have young people who are not certain about their future anymore, when you have youth unemployment at sort of between 18 and 20%, when the future seems kind of uncertain? How do you manage the politics of that? And that's the challenge. So the ultimate answer to the question of whether China, we will look back in 20 years and say, was this a moment of decline, will rest on how China manages that transition.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about David Lammy making his rare visit to China. I think it's only the second visit as foreign secretary that's been made in 6 years. I wanted to ask you what you think he's hoping to achieve in this diplomatic mission.
Well, I suspect rather as George Osborne hoped to achieve during the ill-fated and unlamented golden era of UK-China relations, he's looking for investment, I think. The problem he has is that after Brexit, the UK is too small a market to attract a lot of interest from China. China is investing in Hungary, it's investing in the Czech Republic, it's investing in lots of places inside the European Union. Outside the EU, it's investing in Mexico in the hope of accessing the US market. So Chinese, there's less money to splash around in China now. And people look with a very hard-headed, gaze at whether it's worth it. I find it slightly. Look, I think that we should talk to the Chinese as much as we can because it is important to maintain conversations. I do think we have serious conflicts of interest. It's not clear to me what the UK is going to do, for example, about Chinese electric vehicles. The European Union has erected tariffs, and there are quite big issues, partly for the UK car industry, but also because of security. And it's a mystery to me, but that's something that I would hope he'd talk about. The other big, important pending question is whether Shine, the massive textile company, clothing company, is going to be allowed to list on the London Stock Exchange when it couldn't get listed in New York. So there are big, actually immediate issues which will be on the table. So whatever it is that David Lammy's wanting, the Chinese will have their list of demands too. So what I'd hope he does is that he manages to somehow to balance the national interest in these rather tricky conversations.
Last week, President Lai in Taiwan gave his quite controversial National Day speech, to which China has responded with military exercises, which it's been reported have frightened Taiwan to some extent. What are the implications, do you think, of these military exercises, and what does this mean for Taiwan and China's relationship?
First of all, whatever Lai had said, we would have seen a reaction because William Lai is a DPP leader, and that's a Taiwanese party, and the Chinese disapprove of the DPP. They're much more at home with the Kuomintang, which was originally a mainland party. So they suspect that the DPP, whatever they say, are working towards independence in Taiwan. China is increasingly, conspicuously working towards the forced integration of Taiwan into China. The means of achieving that is really what's under discussion. And those exercises were interesting because they surrounded the entire island. And they were a demonstration that China can really quite easily blockade Taiwan when it wishes to. And because Taiwan is an island, unlike Ukraine, you can't get people out and you can't get goods in if there's a naval blockade. This is particularly sensitive in energy because Taiwan imports its oil, its gas, and its coal. And particularly gas, it only has between a week and 2 weeks supply of LNG. So if you manage to cut off the resupply, then you begin to have energy problems very, very quickly in Taiwan. So it's basically saying, if you don't play ball, we can slowly strangle you. We don't have to invade you. We can, break your society and break your economy by doing this. Now, what will the world do about that? It's not clear at all. Would America mobilize to break a blockade? Would the UK mobilize to break a blockade? It's not clear.
I think all that Trump so far has threatened, recently, just yesterday there was news that Trump threatened Taiwan, but China with tariffs in the case that they were to attack Taiwan. Again, that's
I don't see them.
Exactly.
I don't see them cowering in Beijing at the thought of tariffs from Trump. To be honest, we already have tariffs. We've got 20% tariffs on a lot of goods. He's threatened tariffs before, and curiously, he thinks that if he puts tariffs on Chinese goods, it's the Chinese who pay the tariff. It's not. It's the American consumer, and he goes on insisting that this is a tax on foreign countries. No, it's not. So, they'll sell a fewer goods into the United States, but it's not going to change their policy on Taiwan.
And what do you think the relationship or the way in which diplomacy will change or stay the same in the case that Trump comes into power?
I think that it would actually be very good for China if Trump came into power, because the last time Trump was in power, despite his slogan, he really made America small, by becoming an unreliable ally, at the same time as asking China's neighbors to kind of sign up to an anti-China position when they're all trading with China, they have to live with China, China's very big and rather worrying. What they want from the United States is, reliable backing, and Trump destroys alliances. So frankly, in two ways, I think it would cause people to question the health of American democracy in ways that also suit China, because that's China's line. And it would weaken America so much in the wider world that China would have a relatively free hand.
I was speaking to Michael Sheridan the other day about his book, The Red Emperor, and he said a very, very similar thing. Yeah. He said that Harris would be a stable option, and that the problem with Trump 4G is that Trump is very unpredictable.
He's unpredictable, and he regards every international, every bit of diplomacy as a transaction, and transaction in very, very limited terms. He doesn't, I don't think, understand any value that's not monetary, and you don't do global diplomacy. You don't build alliances like that. It's not how it works.